Ladies and gentlemen, there were so many important fantasy football lessons to be learned in week 9. If you didn't catch it or you just missed the games, that's why I'm here. I'm going to go over 10 of my most important lessons I've learned over this past week in fantasy football. Now, I'm recording this on Sunday night. If something drastic happens on Monday, I won't be covering it. I'm sorry. I want this video to be out by Monday. Starting it off hot here, Joe Mixon had the game of his career on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. I predicted that this would be a blowout win for the Panthers. I can't take all. I'm gonna take a little credit. I'm gonna take a little credit for this. This was a massacre on the Bengals front. They were just destroying the Panthers' defensive line the entire game. 55.1 fantasy points for Joe Mixon. This is in a PPR league, by the way. 5 total touchdowns. Now, obviously, this is an outlier game. I doubt this will be even close to replicated maybe by any running back the rest of the season, but he had an amazing game, and I gotta do a little hat tip to Joe Mixon. He had an incredible game. The game script literally favored him from the first touchdown. You know, Joe Mixon got that first touchdown. You're like, okay, Joe. All right, is it going to be one of these days where Joe Mixon's running all over him? Yes, it was. He got that second touchdown. You're like, okay, all right, Joe. 2 touchdowns. You know, that's when running backs usually stop. Maybe 3. Once he got that third one. All right, Joe. It's still the first half, by the way. In the second half, you knew they were going to ride Joe Mixon into the ground, get him as many fantasy points as he could possibly get. I mean, obviously, they're not concerned about fantasy points, but in our view, we are only focused on fantasy points. So 55.1 is amazing. I would expect him to definitely come back to reality once the games are closer and they don't have the lead the entire game. I believe the Bengals will go forward and look for Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins while Jamar Chase is out. And once Chase gets back in the lineup, you're looking at this lineup like it was a couple weeks ago. But Joe Mixon, fantastic week. This is the one thing I have to say here. The most important lesson on Joe Mixon. Do not give up too much for Joe Mixon. If somebody in your league has Joe Mixon and they offer you,
yeah, take Joe Mixon for Christian McCaffrey, or take Joe Mixon, it's a fair trade for Alvin Kamara. Take Joe Mixon for any
number of these pass-catching running backs that have way higher upside on a week-to-week basis. Do not be fooled by this one outlier week. That's all I'm gonna say. Don't be fooled. Don't trade for Joe Mixon. Don't overvalue Joe Mixon is the big lesson right here. All right, let's talk about lesson number 2 here. Davante Adams had a massive game. 36 fantasy points. 17 targets, which is unbelievable to see. You rarely ever see wide receivers with over 15 targets, let alone 17 targets. And just last week when I posted my wide receiver rankings videos, what I said was I was concerned about Davante Adams having consistent targets. Boy, he showed up. He showed up big time. After only having 1.2 fantasy points last week, the dude puts up over 30 this week, 17 targets, 10 catches, 2 touchdowns, an unbelievable week. Now, we've known that Davante Adams is the real deal for quite some time now. It's not shocker at all. Since Green Bay, he's always been good. He's always been an elite wide receiver 1 on any fantasy team, and even almost any team in the league, he's the wide receiver 1. How consistent is he going to be going forward, though? That's my only question mark again. And I know he just had a massive week, but I want to see this replicated over and over and over again. And I'm not particularly worried about Davante Adams. I'm more worried about Derek Carr in these situations. Derek Carr has been known to have these games where he just cannot do anything with the ball. Even if wide receivers are open, I feel like Derek Carr has these, like a streaky game where some days he's just on point and the next day he is just awful. So we have to monitor that coming forward. Also, Davante Adams' schedule is absolutely brutal coming up. We have to take that into account. Even though you're still starting him every week, just maybe lower expectations going into these final weeks. Let's take a look quick at his schedule. All right, so coming up here, we got Indianapolis, which is not a great matchup. We got Denver, which is what, number 1 in the league against wide receivers on the outside. We got Seattle, which is also very good against wide receivers on the outside. Then you got a pretty good matchup against the Chargers. Rams, you don't love the matchup. New England, definitely don't like the matchup. Pittsburgh, it's all right. San Francisco to end out the year. That's not the best. That's not really what you want to be looking forward to when you're heading into the fantasy playoffs with Davante Adams, but He's a playmaker. You got to have him in your lineup every single week. And he showed it here today with 36.6 fantasy points in week 9. Gotta love to see that if you're a Davante Adams fantasy owner. Lesson number 3 this week is going to be Travis Etienne is an RB1 lineup lock every single week moving forward here on out. This past week against the Raiders, he 28 carries, 109 yards. That's not the most productive day in the world, but he had 2 touchdowns to come out with it and a couple catches. 2 weeks in a row, this guy has proved that the offense literally revolves around him. Everything is going through Travis Etienne. And even when they're getting blown out, like some running backs, you have to worry about that because they don't get catches out of the backfield. Etienne will get those targets out of the backfield if the team is losing. So you don't have to worry about that at all. He has 20 plus carries the past 2 weeks. You can expect 20 plus carries every single time you put him in your lineup if the game is close or if they're winning. I can tell you that for a fact right now. You're very excited about Travis Etienne, and he could definitely be a league winner for you. I don't really know what else to say about this guy. I don't have any more to, branch off of here. We're just going to leave it at that. He might be a league winner here. Travis Etienne looking like a stud here in week 9. Another guy that's looking like a stud, very similar situation, Kenneth Walker. He's been, the starter for a couple more weeks now. He's proved in 4 straight weeks that he's the workhorse running back in this backfield. Seattle looks good. Seattle looks very good. They've had the lead a lot of these games that they're playing in, or it's close. One or the other. You love to see that as a Kenneth Walker fantasy owner. 18 plus carries in the last 4 games. He's got the volume. He's got that big play ability. He's one of the hardest runners in the league, which you love to see. 7 touchdowns in the last 5 games. This guy just has a knack for finding the end zone in almost every single game that he started in. Every single game that he started in. If we take a look at the stats, he's found the end zone. Another league winner? Question mark, question mark, question. I don't know. Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, both seem like league winners, and they weren't starters at the beginning of the year, but they are certainly starters right now. You're feeling very good about these guys. Now, lesson number 5 for week 9, the Miami Dolphins are a legitimate team that is going to put up points on points on points every single week. I don't think you have to be worried about a matchup against the Miami Dolphins. I really don't think you do. This team is up there with the Chiefs in the amount of points that they score. When you have Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, maybe Juju, he's getting into that territory after watching the Sunday night game. He's gotten a lot of points here. This offense is going to produce week in and week out, every single week. Doesn't matter who they're going against. You know that once you're going up against the team that has all these people, you're like, oh God, I got to go against Mahomes, Kelce, and Juju this week. It's not going to be a good week. That's how you're feeling against the Dolphins. Hill, Waddle, Tua. In your lineup every single week here on out. Does not matter about the matchup. They are scoring fantasy points on fantasy points on fantasy points. Winning people their leagues if they have all 3 of them. I mean, come on. The Dolphins look great. The Dolphins look absolutely great with Tua. I have nothing more to say about it. Start all of these players. Now, lesson number 6 is quite the opposite of what we just talked about. The Bucs. You should be very worried if you have any of the Bucs players on your fantasy team. Personally, I just traded for Tom Brady and Mike Evans a couple weeks ago. All right. And it's not looking like the best decision ever. Tom Brady is underthrowing a ton of receivers, looks very uncomfortable out there. And even if he's not underthrowing his receivers, half of his receivers can't catch the ball. Mike Evans, I'm watching this game against the Los Angeles Rams. Mike Evans is wide open so many times. Please, Mike Evans, you need to catch a ball, man. I don't know how many, I know it's a lot easier from behind a screen to say, please just catch the ball. He's wide open, man. You get paid for a living to do this. You're a great receiver, Mike Evans. This is my call out to you, Mike Evans. Please save my season because you can't catch something that's coming right to you. I don't understand. I really don't. And watching this Bucs offense is like watching paint dry. 3 and out, 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 3 and out. It's, oh my God. Like, what do we do? I don't know if it gets better. I really don't know if it gets better. I didn't think this was a terrible matchup against a Rams team that has been struggling. They still got the win, which makes me even more concerned. Like, are they even going to be that worried to change anything? I don't know. And then lesson number 7, let's go over to the Rams. The Rams look even worse. The lamb chops. The Rams look even worse. God, I'm ready to give up completely on the Rams team unless you have Cooper Kupp at this point. Allen Robinson, useless. He's just not getting any. He's getting some targets here and there, but they're like 5-yard slant routes. Then you got Tyler Higbee. Can't catch a ball to save his life. You know, Higbee's been useless for a couple weeks now. Van Jefferson got targeted this week, finally. Deep balls, not even close to him. The balls aren't even close to him. And to top it all off, Stafford gets sacked probably once or twice a drive. Like, it's really bad. It's just as bad as the Bucks. Like, that game was one of the worst games that I've ever watched in my life. Sack, punt, just over and over. It was just awful. Bucks, Rams, if you have any player on either of these guys, unless it's Cooper Kupp, you should be a little bit worried about these guys. All right, moving on to lesson number 8 here. The Bears, they are looking better and better every single week, and you're loving to see it. Justin Fields, specifically, he needs to be rostered. You guys need to be rostering Justin Fields. He's looking great. He's looking great through the air. He's looking great on the ground. The only problem is this is screwing over the whole Bears backfield. So that's where it's not so good. You know, you got David Montgomery, who, he got 5 points maybe. Then you got Khalil Herbert, who had 2 points. So my concern going forward for this offense is not about Justin Fields, not about Darnell Mooney, not about Cole Kmet, but more of David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert actually getting any action, because Justin Fields had a massive day on the ground. So what information did you get from that will make you think that he just stops running the ball completely or they hand the ball off some more? It doesn't at all. All right. I know they were in a shootout this entire game. This is a 3-headed backfield now. Now you got to not only be worried about, if you're a David Montgomery owner, about Khalil Herbert, you got to be worried about Justin Fields running every other play. So I don't know about that. Maybe if I do own Darnell Mooney or Cole Kmet, by the way, on the other side of things, I'm taking one more week. They have one more great week. You know, Mooney had 17 or 18. Cole Kmet had a touchdown this week. I might be playing him after this week. This week or one more week, and then I'm putting them in the lineup. And if they fail me, we had a good sample size. You know, we had a good sample size, and we made the best decision possible. But that's going to be lesson number 8. All right, lesson number 9. Bench anybody and everybody on the Colts versus a good defense. That's what I took away from this week. Michael Pittman, 5.2 fantasy points. Deion Jackson had an awful day on the ground. Sam Ehlinger got sacked 9 times. 9 times? How are you getting sacked 9 times? Offensive line is not doing any protecting, which means, by the way, Jonathan Taylor fantasy owners, I'm sorry, he's not going to be going anywhere. Pittman's not going to be getting any catches. They're not going to be winning any games. This is just an LLL scenario all over the place. They got a bad schedule coming up here. If we're going to take a look at it, let's see who you're actually going to be playing Colts players against, because it's not looking too good. All right, so let's run down the schedule here quickly. All right, the Colts are going to be going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, which you're starting most players against. You're starting the Colts players against the Las Vegas Raiders. Philadelphia, no. Pittsburgh, low scoring game. Guarantee you that's going to be a low scoring game. So I wouldn't be too sure about starting them there. Cowboys, no. Minnesota, in the middle. Chargers, probably would start them. Giants, no. It's not looking good for the Colts. It's not looking good for any fantasy players on the Colts. I really can't give you any words of encouragement right now. That's going to be lesson number 9. Lesson number 10, to cap it all off here, Allen Lazard seems to be the only consistent Packer player, other than maybe if you use tight ends and you have Robert Tonyan. I mean, Lazard from week 3 on has had double-digit fantasy points. Rodgers looks absolutely terrible. 3 picks against the Detroit Lions, one of the worst teams in the league on defense. Dobbs went out with an injury early on. Aaron Jones, super inconsistent on this offense. And then you got AJ Dillon, who has good games in real life, but when it comes to fantasy points, he's unusable. So let me know in the comment section down below what we're doing with Packers players, what you're doing with Rams players, what you're doing with Bucks players, what you're doing with Colts players. All of these are great questions to have conversations about in the comment section below. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. This has been the week 9 lessons learned. Have a great day, guys. Good luck in your next fantasy matchups. Peace out.